Hey, what's going on, everybody? Nick here, and I'm back with another lockdown fly tying video. And today I'm going to be doing another Puget Sound fly. This fly is about as easy and simple as it gets to tie. This is really the ultimate guide fly. It takes 3 materials, it's unbelievably simple, and it flat out catches fish. To be perfectly honest, this pattern, the last probably year and a half that I've been fishing it, has become my absolute most productive pattern. I've probably caught more fish on this fly than any 2 or 3 flies combined. It's really amazing how well this thing has fished, to the point that I had kind of debated about whether I even really wanted to do a video for this fly. I just kind of, in the back of my head, I selfishly wanted to just keep it for myself as my own secret weapon, but I've always kind of laughed at that concept, especially here on Puget Sound. I don't believe that these fish really ever get a chance to get educated to certain patterns. Maybe at one of the couple more popular beaches where those fish just get hammered day in and day out, but that concept is kind of silly. So I just decided I was going to go for it. I posted this online a bunch. I've had a ton of people fish it in my boat. Made believers out of a lot of people, so it's not like it's a great secret anyway. So the story with this fly, about a year and a half ago, I don't remember exactly when, I was fishing the South Sound with my good buddy Rolf. We were just out kind of fun fishing one day, and we'd had a good morning. We'd caught sea and cutthroat, resident coho, had a lot of action. We were fishing squimp patterns and doing well. Well, late in the morning, maybe pushing noon, Rolf lost one of the squimp that he was fishing on the bottom. And I went to reach into my bag to pull him out another one, and he said, "Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll dig something out of one of my boxes." And he started rooting around, and he's up in the bow of my boat, and he says, "I'll fish this." And he said, "We do pretty well on these on brown trout in Montana." Rolf being originally from Montana. And I took a quick glance at it. I didn't pay a lot of attention, but it was this stupid, flashy little thing tied on a like a long shanked freshwater hook with a cone head. And I started kind of giving a bunch of crap. I was like, "Oh man, no self-respecting Puget Sound fish is going to eat that stupid, simple little thing," and just kind of rubbing it in. Well, I had to go and open my big mouth because we moved down to a new stretch of beach and started fishing, and Rolf started getting absolutely lit up. He was getting bit nearly every cast. He was catching fish, hooking fish, losing fish, missing fish, just a ton of action. And I really was not having any. Now, I like to think I'm pretty good at catching these fish, and I was kind of starting to develop a complex. I just wasn't getting bit. Rolf was in the bow of the boat, so he was, getting first water, so to speak. But that was clearly not the issue. I just couldn't find a fly that they were interested in, and Rolf's little flashy thing was getting destroyed. Well, after about the 10th or 12th fish of his that we netted, when the fish hit the net, it was a sea run cutthroat, and it puked up a bait fish that kind of floated to the surface and drifted down the side of my boat. And I reached down and I snagged it, and I threw it up on the center console of my boat, and I looked at it, and it was a little 1.5 to 2-inch anchovy. So I took the fly he was using and I laid it right next to the anchovy, and light bulb went off. Like, this little fly basically looked like an anchovy when it was wet and in the water. Anchovies being really sparkly when they're all schooled up. And I actually took a picture of it because it was really interesting to see, like, the whole match the hatch concept, which I don't do that much of in Puget Sound. So after that trip, I went home and tried to tie some up myself, obviously. I wasn't going to do it on a long shank freshwater hook. I'm not a fan of long shanked hooks if I can avoid them. But I used what I had, and this is basically what I came up with. And it's pretty similar to what he was fishing that day. And from that day on, this fly has absolutely just knocked it out of the park for me. I can't say enough good about this pattern. It just flat out catches fish. I will forever be indebted to Rolf for tying that fly on that day, because if he hadn't done so, there's no way I would have discovered this thing. Throughout that day, Rolf kind of jokingly dubbed this the Silver Surfer. I am sure this fly actually has a name. I know it's been tied before. It's not like I'm anything original, or that one was original. We just call it the Silver Surfer just for fun. I know I have a customer that's dubbed it the Judy Garland. Another customer has dubbed it the Christmas tree ornament. I had one guy on the boat this summer that when I tied this on, he said, "Oh, it's a kokanee killer." So he was familiar with the fly. Nothing new here, nothing that I've created or I'm trying to take credit for. However, I just want to kind of show you how I tie it and talk a little bit about it because it flat out just absolutely crushes fish. I know if I hadn't seen it for myself, I might not believe it. You know that with the huge boom in population of anchovies in the South Puget Sound, it kind of makes sense that this flashy little fly would catch the interest of fish. But this thing is caught sea run cutthroat all over North Sound, South Sound, Hood Canal. It's caught, you know, everywhere I go. This fly flat out catches fish. So I'm not convinced it's 100% just an anchovy thing. When this fly is in the water, it just comes alive. For something that's so simple looking in the vise, get it wet, get it moving in the water, and you'll be blown away at how nice it looks. With this cone head, it gives it kind of an up and down jiggy action, and when you strip it and then you pause it for just a second and the fly drops, this flash will kind of flare out and pulsate and sparkle, and a lot of the takes come on the drop when you're fishing this pattern, and I think it's just kind of irresistible to fish. It makes a wonderful searching pattern. I know a lot of people, like beach fishermen in particular, are fond of fishing like the Miyawaki popper, gurglers, that kind of thing, the sound searcher. Kind of made, you know, partly because people just like topwater, but also as a searching pattern, because if there's fish around, they'll often at least respond to it. And I find it's the same with this pattern. Fishing from the boat, the elevated platform of the boat, you can really see into the water and see what's going on down there. And it seems that if there's any fish around, they will come up and at least check this fly out. They don't always eat it. I've had plenty of days where they'll come up and follow it and look at it, and it's like they're curious, but they don't actually eat it. But it gives you the chance to see if there's fish around. It's become kind of a confidence fly for me like that, because if I'm fishing a new stretch of beach or I'm, you know, just covering water trying to find fish, I know that if this thing is in the water, fish will at least come look at it. And being from the boat, I can see that happening most of the time. So it's a really good tool for that. Very, very easy to tie. You can crank these out in just a couple minutes. I can do dozens of them in very little time. It's kind of the ultimate guide fly in that regard. I'm not trying to spend an hour at the vise on flies that are just going to get beat up and lost very quickly when I'm guiding. So it's fantastic for that. I can just crank them out, keep my box stuffed with them, no problem. They're cheap to tie, really easy to find materials. There's basically no negative to this fly that I can think of. So I'm going to take this one out here and just get started. So I'm tying this on a Daiichi 2546 hook, size 4. And I have a 5mm brass cone on here. I like the little bit of a bigger cone to really emphasize that up and down when you're retrieving this fly. And I'm using some Vivus white 10-aught thread, and I'm just going to come in behind the cone and get a nice little thread base going here. This would probably be a really good fly to start learning to tie flies on, because it's just so simple, so few materials, and it's very, very productive here in the Sound. I've got some of these tied up in big albacore hooks. I'm going to catch an albacore on it this summer, just to say that I did. So first materials, I'm using some, this is Vivus. It's on a spool. It's a red, kind of a sparkly red flat braid. You can use any sort of red material you want. I've just taken red Flashabou, a few strands, and tied it in and wound it. I've used vinyl ribbing. The original that I saw had vinyl ribbing. I've kind of settled on this flat braid. I just think it looks cool. It's super easy to work with, and works just fine. But you know, I just want some red kind of shining through on the underbody. I come in right behind the cone and tie that down and work my thread back as far as I feel like going. I usually go to about the start of the bend of the hook, but it doesn't really matter. Then I'm just gonna wind this body forward, gonna go a little slower than usual here just for the sake of the video and all that, but I'm not kidding. You can just absolutely crank these things out. Okay, get that up near the cone, doesn't have to be all the way up there, and get it tied off, and then I like to just fold it over and do another couple wraps, just make sure that's good and secure. At this point, you can certainly cover this with a UV resin for durability, or maybe, you know, Sally Hansen's or Head Cement or something. I originally did that, however, I've kind of got away from it just because I don't really find that this is to be the weak spot of this fly. Plus, they're just so simple to tie, so quick that it's like, yeah, I'm not really worried about adding extra steps to make this more durable. I will say if you just use a Flashabou or something to wind around the hook shank for this body, at that point I do like to put some resin on there because that stuff tends to be pretty fragile, but this flat braid, not a problem. Next up, I'm using some silver Flashabou. This is just regular old Flashabou, although this is the micro version. I do kind of like the micro. I use the regular stuff too, but I do like the micro for these smaller versions. I just think it might move just slightly better. And I'm just going to take a decent clump of this. You don't want too much. Too much will, I mean, if you just put a ton on here, it'll still catch fish. But one thing about this is that if you put too much, it doesn't quite move in the water as well. The flash doesn't pulsate out, and it just kind of tends to clump up and just doesn't quite maybe have enough room to breathe. I actually had a customer point that out to me at one point this year. He was fishing one and lost it, and I tied another one on, and he made a half dozen casts, and he asked if I would change it out again. And I said, what do you mean? He said, this one doesn't look right. And I was looking at it in the water, and he was kind of right. It had so much flash that it just didn't quite come alive in the water the way that I would like. So I'm just going to kind of measure this out to the length that I want. Do it as short or as long as you want. I don't want to go too long just to try to avoid short strikes, but I usually kind of err on the side of making it a little longer just because it's real easy to trim on the water if you so choose. I come in right behind the cone, just tie that in, get that good and secure. I have had 2 or 3 times where I pull a new one out of my box. Might need to add just a little bit more. Pull a new one out of my box and go to tie it on, and the flash just kind of falls out in my hand because I didn't secure it quite well enough. But just make sure that's good and on there. Yeah, this fly is, as a fly tire, it's almost offensive in how simple it is. And it took me a while to really just come to terms with it. And to me, it's really proof that a lot of what we do as fly tires is more about us than it is about the fish, because, you know, we can add all these details and materials and cool things to flies, and then I go out there with just some Flashabou lashed to a hook and I catch a ton of fish. So really just sort of drove that point home to me. Then I'm going to flip the hook upside down, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to tie in some more flash on the underside. About the same amount, maybe slightly less. Again, no real right answer. I like to measure it so it's no longer than the top flash, if maybe just a tad bit shorter. In my opinion, having all the flash at kind of different lengths makes this thing really move a lot better. You could certainly just tie in top, tie in bottom, and then trim it. Either flush is okay, or you can kind of make it sort of different lengths, but again, it really doesn't matter, which is my favorite thing about this fly. And a lot of flies, you can just do it however the heck you want. I've tied this in other colors, like using different colors of flash, like coppers and things like that. It looks alright. I've used red at the head. I've used just tried different variations. Olives, I did like a barred olive last year, jump fry season. They all worked, but the original, as this is tied, has just been the absolute go-to. So the last material here is just some white dubbing. I'm using ET Glow Dub from Fly Tires Dungeon. It's kind of a glow-in-the-dark dubbing. I don't think that the glow-in-dark makes any difference to the fish, but makes me feel better about it, so I use it, and I have a lot of this stuff. I'm just going to dub this right onto the thread, and I don't do a whole heck of a lot of just traditional dubbing like this. I'm not super good at it. I do a lot of dubbing loops, a lot of dubbing brushes, but just traditional dubbing in my fly tying, I don't do a ton. Kind of makes me feel like a real trout fisherman when I get a chance to do it. And like I said, I'm not overly skilled in this department. So let's get that dubbed on there and just wrap it up to the cone, kind of cover up those thread wraps. And it's probably not even a necessary step. I'm sure you could fish this without anything up there just fine, but the original one that I was introduced to, that's how it was tied, so that's how I do it. I like to kind of make sure that I use enough dubbing that I can really get it kind of pushed up almost into the cone a little bit, and it's nice and kind of full. Yeah, just a tad bit more. There we go. Another few wraps. Like I said, this does not have to be pretty. Sometimes I'll have like dubbing kind of sticking out wonky, and I don't care. It fits just fine. Just do a whip finish kind of right in here behind the cone. You could use some head cement if you want. Put some glue on the threads before you whip finish it. I don't do that. I think I mentioned that yesterday or day before. I kind of gotten away from head cement on my whip finishes. I just don't find that it matters a whole heck of a lot. But that's it. That is literally all there is to it. It is unbelievably simple and unbelievably productive. You wouldn't believe how much I fish this pattern. I have a whole fly box dedicated basically to just this. Added some variations. One variation that I do kind of like is Spawn Fly Fish makes a 60-degree shank, so it's for tying like articulated flies. And I found some slotted tungsten brass cones that I can get on there. And so I tie this same pattern, and then I just take a short wide gap hook and attach it right to the back of the shank, and it just puts the hook a little further back and helps alleviate short strikes. And it also, with that jig shank and that brass, or excuse me, tungsten gold bead or cone on there, it moves even better in the water. But like I said, you put this, as dumb as this looks in the vise, get it in the water, get it moving, you'll be really impressed with how well this thing looks in the water. So there you go. Give this one a shot. I highly, highly recommend adding some to your box. It won't take much effort to do so. If they work for you, I would love to hear about it. I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy out there and finding some ways to entertain yourself. I'm sure by now fly boxes across the Northwest are getting nice and stuffed full of flies, since we can't go out and lose them right now. But guys, have a good one, and thanks for watching.